Good morning. My name is Sergey Nosov, and today I'm going to show you how to configure Azure Active Directory for Authorization Code Flow. The code for this demo is on GitHub at github.com/order-factory/AD-auth-code-flow. Right, so the application consists of a front end and a back end. The front end is an Angular application, and the back end is an Azure function application. Now, if instead of Azure function application you have a web API, the setup is going to be pretty much the same. We're just using the Azure function app in this demo. So let's take a closer look at the function app. Basically, it has a service that can do many things. Within the service, you can sing, you can dance, you can gamble, you can sit and do nothing, and basically it just puts out a string for each of those. Some of them is where you do multiple things together. You sing and dance. And the important part is that each of these functionalities are being called from a function. Sit and do nothing function is the only one that requires no user claims. Every other one requires some claims. Like, for example, sing function requires the user to claim to be in the sing role. Dance function requires user to claim to be in the dance role. Now, sing and dance function requires user to be in both sing and dance roles. So on and so forth. Like, for example, sing, dance, and gamble function requires user to have all three roles: sing, dance, and gamble. Easy enough? Right. So next, let's take a look at the front-end application. And it's basically an Angular application that calls those endpoints. It has a separate call for each of the endpoints, to the sing endpoint, the dance endpoint, and so on and so forth. Great. All right. Now let's jump to the Azure portal and start creating resources. We'll start by creating a resource group. Right. Let's name the resource group Auth Demo 778. And usually creating resources is fairly quick. In case something takes time, I will be fast forwarding the video, so you'll see some jumps because of that. All right, let's see. Resource group created. Go to resource group. Right. For the function app, we're gonna need the function app itself. We're gonna need app and sites, though that's optional, but highly recommended. So we'll start with app and sites here within the resource group. Okay, reload. Okay, going to choose our resource group. And we're going to name our resources, all of our resources, the same, Auth Demo 778. Right, I want all of them to be in the same region. Okay. so next we are going to create a storage account. Now, this function app we're using in the demo is so simple it doesn't require storage account. Normally, though, all function apps, normally your function app will require a storage account. However, we do need the storage account for this demo because we're gonna use the static website functionality of the storage account to actually host our Angular application. So I'll make sure the location is the same as other resources. And you do want storage v2 for the static website function, and local redundant storage is fine for us. And we'll just accept all the defaults for this demo. Okay, while that is being created, let's go ahead and create the function app. Here we go. Same resource group, same name. We want .NET Core for our function app. Gotta make sure the region is the same. Okay. And you have a few different options to host here. A great thing about function apps, you can host them on consumption plan. That is, you're paying only for what you're using. Okay, in this case, we'll just host it on app service plan. And make sure to select the app insights. We'll create it. Okay. Okay. And it's going to deploy the function app. Now, while that is happening, let's go to our storage account and enable the static website. Okay, our index document is going to be index.html. And for error, we're not going to specify anything. We're just going to accept the default Azure errors. Make sure to save that, which gives us the primary endpoint for our static website. That's where our Azure, that's where we're going to deploy the Angular application to. And keep track of this Z13. That this is what's gonna distinguish our static Azure endpoint URLs from the function app URLs. Right. So let's grab this URL, and one of the things that we need to do here is go to our function app. It's been deployed. Okay, so let's go to the function app, and we need to configure the cross-origin request policy to allow the endpoint of our Angular application. Okay, so let's add that. Great. Now, with the function app created, let's go ahead and publish our backend to the function app. Now, normally you'd have a CI/CD process set up where it gets published from your GitHub repo, but for this demo, we're just gonna right-click publish. So we do want Azure Function App Windows. Let's go ahead and select the function app that we just created, and we're also gonna need to configure application insights. That's the application insights we created. And we'll go ahead and store a connection string to app insights in the Azure app settings. That's good. Okay. And let's go ahead and publish. Okay. So now the important thing, why we're all here. Creating the actual Azure Active Directory configurations for both of our apps. And because we have both backend and front end in Azure Active Directory, we do need to create app registrations for both the backend and the front end. We'll start with the backend. And we are going to create new registration. We're going to call it Auth demo 778-backend. And just this organizational directory is fine. And redirect URL, URI, we can skip that. We actually don't need it for the backend, since we're going to be authenticating through the front end. So this all looks fine. Let's go ahead and create the registration. One of the things we need to do is we need to expose an API, expose a scope. So our front-end application could impersonate the user into the backend application. So let's add the scope. Right. Now scopes are identified by your application ID, and let's go and see what is the URL for our backend application. Okay, which is the function app in overview section here. Yeah, let's copy this URL, and that is going to be our scope instead of this default one it wants us to create. This is going to be easier to understand which application the scope belongs to. All right, so we are going to call the scope user underscore impersonation. Right, and it lets us access backend. Right, something like that. Now, both admins and users want to be able to consent, and that looks good enough. Let's add the scope, and next thing let's check what kind of API permissions we have on the backend application. All right, it looks like Azure automatically added user.read access permission, which is required to sign into the application. Let's go ahead and grant consent to that scope. Very good, very good. Now, let's go back to our function app, and in the Authentication Authorization section, let's go ahead and configure it to use the authentication for non-authenticated members. We want them to go ahead and log in. And for Authentication Provider, we're using Azure Active Directory. Right. So, if you're just creating these for yourself, there is a shortcut here. Instead of creating the backend application registration manually, you could have gone here and said create a new Azure Active Directory app. In business settings, normally a person who creates Active Directory registration is somebody else, so that's why we created the registration separately. So we're going to say here, select existing app, and let's go ahead and select this application that we created. This is the one. Okay. That looks good. Let's hit OK. And let's save. And successfully saved. Great. One of the bugs that Azure had is when you specify the Azure Active Directory application, it didn't actually, the bug is still here. So we need to add a token and audience, and the token audience is going to be the same as the URL of our function app. It's this one. Remember, it's the one without Z13. So it's the function app. Okay, that looks good. Save. Okay. So what we have done so far, we created the backend application registration, we created the resources, and we assigned the backend application to the function app. Now let's go back to Azure Active Directory and create a registration for the front end application. Right? The backend application registration is here, so let's create a new one for the front end. Yeah, click this new registration button up here. Now be careful here. So this is all still good, this directory. However, for the authentication configuration, this is very important. Here you need to select single page application. Our front end is a single page application, so do select single page application here. Do not leave it on the web application. If you do that, you'll run into problems with cross-origin requests. So it has to be a single page application. To redirect after login, we'll just redirect to the home page of our single page application. See this URL here with Z13. Yep, that's our front page. Okay, that looks good. Hit register. Great. So we do need to configure a couple of things here. Remember, we created the user impersonation scope on the backend application. So now we need to give the front-end application permission to access the backend application. And here is how we do that. Click on API permissions here. Click on Add a permission. Select APIs My Organization Uses. Find the backend application. Select the user impersonation permission and click Add Permissions. Easy enough, right? So after we added the permission, also make sure that the user read claim from Microsoft Graph is also in the list of permissions. And if not, just add it. Here's how you do it. You also click Add Permission, select Microsoft Graph, delegated permissions, and you can search for all kinds of permissions that the Graph API has. User read is the only one we need. So after you're done adding permissions here, go ahead and grant consent. After that is successful, you will see those granted consent green icons. And with the front-end application created, we are now ready to start configuring everything in the Angular application. So we're going to need the application client ID. Let's copy that and let's go to our Angular application and open the environment configuration settings, and let's start filling in the configuration settings. So client ID goes here. What else do we need? We need the tenant ID. Tenant ID goes into this authority URL. We need the backend API URL, which is the one without Z13. That will look like the following. So let's replace this backend API URL with our URL domain. It looks good. And the front end is the one with Z13. So let's replace this front end URL with the domain name that has Z13 in it. That is the endpoint where our Angular application is hosted as static files. All right, let's see. So let's see everything we have here. We have the base URL is where the endpoints of the Azure Function app are. We have the client ID. That's the front end Azure application client ID. We have authority, which is the login identifier for our Azure Active Directory. You will have your own GUID here. Redirect and post logout redirect URLs. We're just redirecting those to homepage of the Angular application. And we also have a couple of protected resources here. So any requests to the function app are going to be protected, and requests to Graph API to get our user ID are going to be protected as well. So that is pretty much it for the front-end application configuration. Let's go ahead and build it. And once it is done building, we are going to deploy it. So let's see, what can we do while it is building? Right, it's done building. Let us go ahead and publish it. So this is our build artifact, and the same. Normally you will have CI/CD pipeline set up to publish from. We are just going to directly right-click publish to the storage account. Great. So what have we done so far? We published backend, we published front end. Next thing that we need to do is get our application roles configured. But do not configure application roles on the front end. Those application roles belong to the back end. So let's go ahead and create our application roles. If you remember, users needed to claim that they can sing, they can dance, they can gamble. So let's go ahead and create a couple of roles. Create a sing role. And allowed member types are users and groups. Okay. And let's also go ahead and create the dance role. Also for users and groups. Once the roles are created, let's go ahead and assign those roles to the user. For that, we need to go into enterprise applications. Here, that is Azure Active Directory enterprise applications, the backend. Let's see, users and groups. And we see that I already have default access, so let's also add me to the select user, to the sing role, and another one to the dance role again. Select user, select role, select, assign. Right, so I am now in the sing and the dance role. And I am not in the gamble role. So that's going to be important for our testing later on. All right. So let's see. What else do we need to do? Let us go to our resource group and check one thing in the storage account. There is a bug with the way web applications get deployed that, let's see if it was fixed or not. Okay, it hasn't. Notice this CSS file, which is a part of the Angular application that we deployed. The content type is application octet stream, which is not correct. It should be Where is it? Here. It should be text /CSS. Yeah. Okay. Let's see if it took. All right. Great. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and try to access our application, and we'll do that from the incognito window. Let's see. Okay, here is our application. So it has these links: to do nothing, to sing, dance, to gamble, to sing and dance, to sing, dance and gamble. And let's see what happens when we log in. Okay. I am going to log in using my personal account here. All right, we logged in. Now it sees that we have logged in. Let's try calling the, and I'll enable the console. Let's try calling the nothing endpoint. This is the one that requires no claims, as you remember. And this is the first time we're calling our backend application. So it took a while for it to spin up. And as you can see that we got the response from the back application. I can sit and do nothing. Okay, let's try calling the sing endpoint. I can sing because I claim and I'm a member of the I can sing role. Let's try calling dance. Yes, I can dance. What happens if we call gamble? Authentication failed. I do not have that claim. I am not in the dance role. So how about sing and dance? I do have both, so I expect this to work. And it does. I can sing, I can dance. How about sing, dance, and gamble? No, I cannot. I do have sing and dance roles, but I don't have the gamble role, so this one fails. And that's pretty much it. Easy, right? Took us about, what, 35 minutes? All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate you watching this demo, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions. With that, have a good one and good luck on your journey.